legendary and prolific horror film icon, the English actor Christopher Lee. He played Dracula in the Hammer horror films. He's also known for playing Asian supervillain Fu Manchu, which by today's standards is kind of frowned upon a little bit, considering that he does the character in yellow face, and it leans its way towards racial stereotyping. But Fu Manchu, nonetheless, we are going to cover 2 of the 5 films today, the last 2 of the films, which have been released in 4K UHD, and that is Blood of Fu Manchu and the Castle of Fu Manchu, both directed by Jess Franco, and these are the last 2 of 5 of the films. In this video, I'm going to cover the transfer of these new 4K UHD releases. We're going to talk about the packaging here. We're going to talk a little bit about Blue Underground. I'm going to cover my reaction to the story of these films and the content within the films a little bit. And if you would do me a favor, if you haven't done so already, if you would like this video. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Let's get into it. Fu Manchu was created by very white English author Sax Romner, and his novel started around 1913, and this supervillain was in several novels, and this character has been on film a pretty good bit. He used to be popular. Now everyone's all like, don't like it anymore because it's racial stereotyping and putting like putting like a Asian guy as a villain. That's kind of a over the top super villain. But clearly it was very popular back in the day, back when these novels were written, and back when there's been several incarnations of the film, including one with Boris Karloff playing the main character. The last one to date, Peter Sellers played the character, and this was more of, at that time when Peter Sellers did it, they knew it was offensive and then they played it for laughs, but apparently it wasn't very funny. But I will recommend another film that Peter Sellers plays an Asian detective in called Murder by Death, which is also a spoof because they used to have Asian detectives played by white people in these older films as well, but this was like it was basically making fun of that stereotype. And Murder by Death, I do recommend it. It is quite funny. And Peter Sellers is terrific in it. But we're talking about Christopher Lee as Fu Manchu. And he played him over the course of 5 different films. I've previously only seen the first one. And Christopher Lee himself said that was the only good one. And when I saw it, I didn't think it was all that good. Now, the reason when I first saw these pop up, look at these covers. These are some terrific artwork on these covers, and it just, to me, when I first saw it, is like, it looks like a lot of fun. Yeah, it's ridiculous, Christopher Lee playing an Asian guy, but it's Christopher Lee, and I'd seen him before in the other one, and I was like, maybe they get more and more absurd as they go on, and we're going to get more into what these are in just a minute, but they are absurd at the very least. Now, this makeup on Christopher Lee, it looks pretty good. Now, take a look at this. Now, I think that looks it's pretty convincing. At least they did a lot of work on making him look Asian. Thankfully, he doesn't try to do an Asian accent. He changes his voice slightly, but he's got that booming, I'm Christopher Lee, I'm playing Fu Manchu. But he does it a little differently than he normally does, but he doesn't change his accent, and he does have that very commanding presence. And they do everyone a favor by casting most of the people who are other characters who are Asian. They do cast them as Asian people for the most part. So there is that to be said. And I think that was kind of the whole thing, It was like the main guy was played by like a well-known actor that people would connect with, usually like a horror actor or something like that. And I don't know, it was just part of the whole thing, and now people just don't get behind it anymore. They find it very offensive. I don't know. I guess it is really goofy, but I wonder if this could be done with an actual Asian actor playing Fu Manchu, and if it would have the same effect. Or there's not only, I guess, it's not only bad because of the fact that a white dude's playing an Asian dude. Is probably bad as well because they present him as a Asian stereotype doing evil things. it's goofy, but I guess it could. There's no real layers to this Fu Manchu character. He's just an asshole. He's like, I mean, there's layers in a way, but he wants destruction of some sort. In each film, he has a different diabolical plan, and he's very focused on that plan. I don't know how he gets people behind him, because often when, other than his daughter who he hangs out with, and his daughter's in all 5 of the films, played by the same actress, but like most of the people, especially the non-Asian characters, if he ever like makes a deal with them or gets them to help him in some way, he always ends up killing them or trying to kill them. So it's like, why would anybody trust this guy? Because he's just gonna kill you. Once he gets what he needs out of you, you're dead. That's it. Apparently, the reason Christopher Lee decided to take this role to begin with is he had been kind of being stereotyped, ironically, as Dracula, and he wanted to get out of that and do something different. And they offered him the role, and he looked at it and he's like, "This is a very challenging thing to do. Like play an Asian character that I'm not Asian. I don't know the culture, and it's just a very huge challenge as an actor to play somebody who's nothing like you." And that was what he saw. And later on in life, now when it was made, it wasn't frowned upon. Everybody was on board with it. They were loving it for the most part. Maybe some Asian people were offended by it. Now I did see that the Boris Karloff version, which I've never seen, did at the time offend the Chinese, I think maybe the Chinese government or something to that nature. But like I say, I haven't seen it, and maybe Boris Karloff does try to do an Asian accent. I'm not sure if he does or not. Let me know if you've seen it. Let me know if he does it. So yeah, he saw this as an opportunity, and it was an opportunity. It worked out well for him at the time. Now later on, after later on and much later on, he did say, I wouldn't take this role now because now people consider it offensive. But that back then, it wasn't that way. It did open up some new avenues for Christopher Lee after doing this film. And it probably helped people more understand Asian people, or more understand that they needed to have a change for Asian people, and maybe paved the way for more Asian characters or more developed Asian characters to happen later on. Jess Franco was brought on to direct both of these films, and I must say that was kind of a interesting choice. He was a prolific Spanish filmmaker known for low-budget, surreal, and avant-garde films, often using erotica in his films and horror elements and things of that nature, but he often exploring taboo subjects. So to bring him onto this, I guess they wanted to have something a little different for this series, and they got it. These 2 films are often considered the worst of the 5 films. But right now, they're the only 2 to date to have a very amazing 4K UHD treatment. These were released by Blue Underground. Blue Underground is a smaller niche label that focuses on carefully curated horror and exploitation films. And I'm going to show you a few examples of these. Their catalog isn't huge, but each release receives a lot of attention. Now, for instance, here's one, A Maniac Cop 2 by William Lustig. This is a very good release as far as especially the commentary on it, but the 4K UHD transfer is amazing. Here's another William Lustig release, Uncle Sam. Now, I did a review on this. You can check that out on my channel. It's a pretty good one. There's another William Lustig one, Vigilante. And also, here's another one with Christopher Lee in it, Night of the Blood Monster. Now, like I say, they don't have a lot of titles in their catalog. Now, they do have not like a small amount, but not as many as, say, a label like Scream Factory or Arrow Video. But they do have a fairly impressive amount, and they're able to spend more time on each one to make them more impressive. So as far as what they've delivered here with Fu Manchu, I think for what these are, they look fairly good for the 4K transfers. Now, do note that these films were shot on 16mm film. A lot of times, it is a lower quality film than, say, 35mm films that most films are shot on. So you do see a little bit of that. Now, especially in the castle of Fu Manchu, it looks a lot worse, especially in the exterior day scenes. Sometimes it kind of looks a little bit closer to maybe something that might make you think about like video or early video or something of that nature, even though it is film and you can see that film grain. That film grain in these films is pretty thick. You're often going to see that. It looks even on the Blu-ray, it's even more pronounced. But on the 4K, the film grain's there, but you really want it to be there. You don't want them to scrub it out because it takes away the detail and it takes away what you really want to see. It's going to look like you're in some kind of like AI hell world or something to that nature without the film grain. Now, the way Jess Franco shot this film, the improvisational style that he shot it, a lot of times it seems that the shots were kind of maybe came up with on the fly, and sometimes they're not necessarily always in focus, not all the time. And sometimes there'll be even close-ups of people that are very soft focused. But this film was probably shot very quickly, and a lot of times they didn't have the opportunity to get a second take or however many takes it's going to take to get something very clean and focused. Now there are a pretty good bit of shots that are in focus, and the detail there looks very good. Even it's not necessarily that distracting, the ones that are soft focus. I mean, it kind of works for this type of film. These films were made in 1968 and 1969, and I will say they do have a very strong 70s flavor to it. If you're familiar with seeing anything shot in the early 70s, they do have that type of feel going on with it. Particularly the camera work and the exterior shots. And there are a lot of scenes that take place in sets that maybe those set scenes look maybe more like something from the 60s or something like that. And some of them are some pretty cool sets in some of the scenes of the film. But it does have that 70s feel to it, especially in the non-Asian scenes. Now, some of the protagonists, the main characters are English guys. There's like a Nayland Smith and Professor Petrie are both these his emissaries. It is kind of a setup, kind of like a spy thing in a way, where they're not. Fu Manchu's got a pretty good bit of screen time compared to like a lot of times would say in the Dracula films. Christopher Lee would hardly have any. He'd have very little screen time in some of the films, sometimes less than 10 minutes of screen time. But here he has a decent amount, maybe as much as anybody else. But these are very unfocused as far as the characters, and we're going to get into that here in just a minute. Now, both of these films do kind of remind me of a Jean Rollin film. Now, I've covered a few of these in my videos before, like Requiem for a Vampire and Fascination. But his style, Jess Franco's, reminds me a little bit of like a Jean Rollins. I did get that feel from that thought while watching this. The black levels all look satisfactory here. I didn't see a lot of noise in the darker areas of the film. Now, a lot of it is outside day, but you do have some of the films, especially the first one, the Blood of Fu Manchu, does have some exterior night scenes. I thought they all looked fairly organic in general. I think that's a good term when you're looking at these films. They look fairly organic. Now, this is probably the best these films have looked or are ever going to look. And so that's what you get when you get these. Now, let's get into the plot of these things a little bit. Now, I'm not going to go deep into plots, but I will say of these two films, now the Castle of Fu Manchu is the last one, and the Blood of Fu Manchu is the one right before that. Now, I accidentally popped in the Castle and watched it first. So I'm going to say that this one is a lot worse than this one, but neither one of them are that good. Let's talk about the Blood one first. And this one is the better of the two. And this one kind of does what I wanted them both to do in a way. It is really over the top. There is more exploitation in this one. There's some nudity in this one. There's some of the stuff that happens in this is just like, what just happened? So the plot of that one is they bring all these girls in there. They have them all bound, these pretty hot women. They bring them in the Fu Manchu's lair. They got them all like chained together, and they infect them with these little baby snakes, and they bite them, and that gives them the kiss of death. And they somehow hypnotize these women to go after their mortal enemies. And what they do is they approach them, and then they kiss them, and then once that happens, that person becomes blind. And then after, I guess when the moon becomes full, they're all going to die, and that's kind of how it's set up. So you do have a ticking bomb scenario going, and so it's pretty hilarious, really. And then what happens interesting that the girl goes right to his main and British antagonist, and she kisses him, and she puts him blind. So he's blind the whole movie. He's kind of out of commission, but his Professor Petrie, who's in all of the films as well, he brings that same actor plays him in all 5 of the films, but he basically brings him to where they're at in the jungle, and they're trying to find Fu Manchu so they can figure out an antidote to get rid of this. Meanwhile, there's some other random characters. There's another guy in the jungle who you see here. His name's Carl. You see him at the bottom here fighting, and he's kind of looks like an adventurer, and he's kind of in this film he's more like the main protagonist in a way because he's the only one who can fight. And there's also another woman here who's her dad was killed. She was like with the Carl character, and she comes to figure out kind of what's going on with that, and she comes along for the ride. So there's all that going on, and there's also on top of that, there's a character named Sancho who is like a Spanish bandit, and he comes into this town, and he's one of the people that they're trying to kill. And one of the most hilarious scenes. Now he comes into this town, him and his bandits, and they pretty much rape all the women there, and they kill most of the guys who are going to fight them at all. They kill most of the guys, and they steal everything. They loot and they steal everything. So that's something that happens in this film, and that's like, holy moly, what just happened now? But then while that's happening, Fu Manchu's daughter comes up, and she sicks the girl on him, the girl that's supposed to kiss him, and she goes up to kiss him, and instead of like kissing him, he kills her. So then after that, instead of like getting him with a kiss of death, all of these other ninjas come in and they start fighting his bandits, and so then they just kidnap him. So, but I'm not going to get too much. I've probably said more about the plot than I should have. But this one is really over the top entertaining, and it takes place in the jungle a lot, and there's some jungle sets and things to that nature. But it is almost what I wanted when I first saw this cover. It is a little slow in some parts, and the further you get into the film, it becomes a little more boring, I guess, and more obvious about what's going to happen. Once you get further into the film, it becomes more of we know where we're headed with this thing at this point. Now, the Castle of Fu Manchu, on the other hand, this one is really hard to follow. It's all over the place. It's actually very boring for the most part, surprisingly, and that's like the biggest worst flaw of this one is how boring it is. It starts out kind of interesting. He's got a new secret weapon. He's got some kind of ice cubes that are made out of opium that he puts in the water, and it causes like boats or the water to freeze and boats to sink. It's actually at the beginning of it. They cut back and forth between Fu Manchu and then this I guess B-roll footage from this film called A Night to Remember. It's about the Titanic sinking. I tried to watch this. I don't recommend it. I didn't even get through it. Maybe I'll try it again another time. But I just couldn't get into this. But it basically used footage from that film in this film, making it look like Fu Manchu's got a big budget. Or the Castle of Fu Manchu. They got a lot of B-roll in this one in certain points, but that's not even the worst part. It just at first this one seems kind of entertaining at first, and it's going to do what we need it to do in a hilarious way. And this one apparently was spoofed, I think, on Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I can see it could be a lot better with some commentary making fun of the film, because it is like, I don't know, it's very slow and it's very, very boring, and it does have some interesting parts, but it's very disconnected, and sometimes it's like, what is going on in this film? But yeah, but anyway, so that of these two, I would definitely recommend more The Blood over The Castle. But I would have thought, just hearing The Castle of Fu Manchu, that's kind of made me think it was going to be like one of those old Dark Castle type of films, but it's not really. But Christopher Lee, he doesn't save the film. He does keep the performance he does keep it solid. He does do Fu Manchu the way that he typically does, and he's got a decent amount of screen time, but it is kind of a one-note character. Overall, it's a one-note character. He is a psychopath and a bit of a narcissist. At least he kind of treats his daughter right, but she doesn't. At least he doesn't kill her like he does everybody else. Are these films so bad they're good? That's a hard call. I think they're very bad. maybe. Let's take a look at the packaging here. We'll start with the one that I watched first by mistake, The Castle of Fu Manchu, which I guess it really doesn't matter about the continuity. They all kind of begin and end the same way. Probably every one of the novels probably do the exact same thing in each one of them. Like, here's Fu Manchu. He's off to do some dastardly plan. They come up with ways to stop him, and then at the end they stop him, sort of thing. And then he's like, I'm coming back. You'll see me again. Fu Manchu, sort of thing. But here, on the inside, we have the same artwork as on the slip cover. And on the inside, we have 2 discs. We have a 4K and a Blu-ray. Now, something about the Blu-ray, it looks to be a very similar transfer. You do notice more film grain on the Blu-ray than you do on the 4K. There is a reversible insert. It has the same cover art as this, and this must be the original Fu Manchu, the Castle of Fu Manchu artwork, which I think I prefer the new to the old. You know, it's good that they put a Blu-ray and a 4K in here. Say, for instance, if you wanted to go over to someone's house and force them to watch Fu Manchu, how are you going to do that if they don't have a 4K player? But you've got the Blu-ray. If they don't have a Blu-ray player, hopefully they got a DVD player. You need to get a DVD of this thing so you can. Everyone's got to be forced to watch this. You go over to their house and you're just going to have to force them to watch Fu Manchu, Castle of Fu Manchu. A better film, a little bit better film. Let's take a look. It's the same difference here, where we got the same artwork on the slip cover that we have on the insert art. 2 disc, Blu-ray, 4K, and we have the reversible here. Whoa, that looks a lot different than I was expecting it to. You got like a kind of a white background, which is a little different than the disc cover art here. All right, we're about to rate these bad boys, but before we do, go read a little bit off the back here. First, about the transfer. This is Ultra HD with Dolby Vision HDR playback. And then, so on the extras, they have a new audio commentary. Now, there's a pretty good bit of extras on this Castle one here. It's a new audio commentary with film historians, and then they have that on the 4K and the Blu-ray. On the Blu-ray, they got a lot of extra stuff here, and including, there's an older interview here with director Jess Franco. But then they have 2 new ones. One's an interview with Stephen Thrower. It's called Castle of Carnage, where he talks about he's the author of Murderous Passions, the delirious cinema of Jesus Franco. I guess another name for him. And then check this out. They have a riff tracks edition of Castle of Fu Manchu. And that's the one that's probably better to watch. It says riffed by Mike Nelson, Bill Corbett, and Kevin Murphy, and I think that's probably the better way to watch this film. Now the other one, The Blood of Fu Manchu. This one has audio commentary again from the same historians. It has The Rise of Fu Manchu, again with interview with Jess Franco and some of the producers and some of the stars. And it says there's new content on here as well. Another interview with Stephen Thrower, who's wrote that book, The Murderous Passions, the Delirious Cinema of Jesus Franco. And then it's got another riff tracks edition, so you could watch the riff tracks on both of these films, which I didn't do, but I'm sure that is probably the more enjoyable way of watching the movies. Now let's go ahead and rate the films. I'll rate the films on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. First, I'm going to rate the films one at a time. I'm going to do The Blood of Fu Manchu. I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. These are both really bad films. I'm going to give The Castle of Fu Manchu 1.5 stars. So these are probably my lowest rated films to date, if that tells you anything. You know, those riff tracks editions are probably going to be a lot more fun to watch. I'm going to give Blue Underground, I'm going to give them 4 stars for what they've done here. I do like their 4K transfers. They did good work. They got all these extra special features on here, and I really like this cover art. Now, let me know how offended you are by these films, or if you can watch them and not be super offended, or if you can watch them and just say, man, these movies just suck. But if you would do me a favor, if you haven't done so already, if you would subscribe to my channel. Now, if you click this box here, it's going to bring you to another one of my reviews. So if you click that box, which I recommend you do, you're going to see some other awesome review from me, Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Thanks for watching.